as Kenya, we are looking forward to graduating from pledges and commitments to actual disbursement of the resources. When we were in Nairobi, the President chaired a session and we were able to get the Nairobi Declaration with the direction and the agenda for the African continent. Now, these countries now need actual support. And therefore, the re-engineering, what we need to get out of here is the re-engineered financial products, which are concessionary in nature, which do not have too many complications for disbursement, so that the countries can start their action plans on environmental actions to save their countries. We do not want, for instance, because we are already reeling with a lot of public debt through expensive funding. So if we can re-engineer this to have it concessional, and when I say concessional, that means borrowing at even 1% or less, okay, and having a longer period of repayment, maybe even 30 to 40 years, so that countries can actually push the climate action agenda without devastating the overall fabric in their countries. So this is going to be very, very important, and we hope that out of this COP, we will perhaps at the next session be able to see, out of the commitments that were made, let us see what were the actual disbursements to support climate-related action in all these countries, and even have a tabulation where we can see that out of those commitments, so much went to Africa, so much went to Africa in the following order, and to support certain programs, so that we move away from a generalized approach to commitments. So it is important for each country, and Kenya, for instance, to focus on programs, whether bilateral or multilateral, that are properly tailored to deal with the Kenyan challenge. That is one thing. So bilaterals do not mean that you negate a continental approach. It's just that you focus appropriately to make sure it dovetails.
Kenya has an agenda, but we are here in Cop29 not as Kenya. We are here as Africa, because the chair of Africa Heads of State and Government on Climate Change is President William Ruto. And the chair of the Africa negotiating team is also a Kenyan. So I'm speaking for Africa. And we have an agenda here, and we have a plan. Because we met as ministers in Abidjan, Ivory Coast, about 2 months ago. We came with what are our irreducible minimum for this COP. Our heads of state in New York at the Silence of Unga ratified. So COP29, in quotes, is a finance COP. So we must get right the financing issues around climate change. Irreducible minimum is that on financing, there was an agreement in Copenhagen of $100 billion that was never achieved, that there was no tracking system, that there was no mechanism to track it. Now we are bringing in as Africa a new financing mechanism of 1.3 trillion, because the global south and most of Africa, we are the victims. And the polluters are here. So we want the polluters to pay for the victims. So we are coming with a new financing mechanism of 1.3 trillion by 2030. That's one of our key agenda. And in all this financing, it must not be commercial loan or commercial financing. It should be grants. And why do I say? Kenya itself as a country is a victim of climate change in the last 4 or 5 years. From drought, where 5% of our GDP was consumed. 2.5 million livestock was lost in the Asal region. Then we had the floods that killed many of our people. In Nairobi alone, I think 42 people died, but across the country over 400. So we are coming here as really victims of climate change, and climate change is real. And the choice for Kenya today, as I stand here, is between three things: climate change, from drought to floods to landslide. How do we deal with it? That destroy our infrastructure, that affects our budget cycle. Two, debts, the burden of debts. And I think the other key thing is the choice we have to make is developing our country, sustainable development. So on one side, we have the effects of climate change, having heavy burden on our economy. We have the debt burden, and then we have sustainable development. Our people want development.
Agenda yetu kubwa ni kuhakikisha kwamba haya mataifa ambayo yamekuwa yakisema kwamba tuko tayari ama tumetoa kiasi fulani cha usaidizi, tunataka sasa tutoke kwa hiyo hali ya kuzungumza tu. Tunataka tuone kabisa kwamba hizi pesa ama huu usaidizi sasa umefikaje kwa hizo mataifa kama Kenya na zingine, na tunataka tuone ni programu gani ambayo imepewa, ni taifa gani limepewa kiasi gani, ili tuepukane na yale ambayo tumekuwa tukiona kwamba kila COP mtu anazungumza kusema kwamba tumetoa kiasi fulani, lakini pesa hazijafika kwa zile mataifa. Tunataka tuone kwa mfano mashirika kama yale ya Benki ya Dunia, World Bank, ama benki kama African Development Bank, ile ambayo ni ya mataifa ya Kiafrika. Tunataka tuone sasa huo usaidizi ukienda pale, ili mataifa zetu zianze kupata usaidizi kwa riba ambayo ni ya chini zaidi, kwa sababu uchumi wetu kwa sasa kwa kijumla katika bara la Afrika una changamoto nyingi. Kwa hivyo tunataka huu usaidizi uje kwa riba ambayo haitatuumiza. Ndio sasa tuanze kutekeleza agenda yetu katika mambo ya climate.
Wana ni block.
Unajua bado napita kwa mkono.
Oh.